Thank you very much. Okay, the next panel is coming up now, The Way to Scale. So please, welcome to the stage, Christopher Purves, Jakob Pappenbrock, Kirsten Benny, Sartak Patnaik, and your moderator, Elizabeth Howcroft.
So this session is about the structures within banks for deploying AI and how having a centralized platform or hub within a bank can help with getting to grips with this fast-changing technology. So 3 of our panelists run these kind of platforms within banks. If you could wave when I say your name, then everyone knows who's who. We've got Chris from UBS, Kristen at Barclays, and Sartak from BNY. And then on the tech infrastructure side of things, we have Jochen Pappenbrock, head of financial technology for EMEA at the chipmaker NVIDIA, which just yesterday overtook Microsoft to become the world's most valuable company. So it's a very impressive lineup here. Great to have you all here. And there's going to be some opportunity for questions at the end. So if you could just think of those while we're talking, then yeah, we're prepared. Okay, so firstly, maybe we should just get on the same page about what we mean when we're talking about a centralized platform. Maybe we can go around and you could each set out where your team sits within the bank structure, what you're trying to achieve, and whether this is something new you've created in the last couple of years because of generative AI, or whether it's an adaptation of something that already existed. Kristen, let's start with you.
Okay, thank you. So hi, everyone. Kristen Benny from Barclays. So I run innovation and partnerships for the group, and that includes co-leading our Center of Excellence for Generative AI. That's a relatively new construct for Barclays, and my role is also new at Barclays. So that covers the use and the deployment of generative AI across all our businesses and functions.
Great. And Sartak?
Hi, I'm Sartak Patnaik. I have 2 roles in BNY. One is head of engineering for some of our mission-critical applications around clearance, collateral, payments, liquidity, and digital assets, as well as running artificial intelligence for the bank, build out of the centralized hub, which allows us to build resilient, scalable, and innovative solutions for our clients.
Great. And Chris?
Yep. Chris Purvis. I help run a group called Group Emerging Technology. We were formed relatively recently, actually, last few months, with the specific mandate really to kind of, I guess, sort AI at UBS where I work. And that's everything from the actual strategy for the bank, like what should we do as a bank, as a firm, how should we approach AI, all the way down to actually how you implement it and actually how you get it working.
Great. And in all your cases, it's a case of working across various different teams, is that right? Okay, great. And then Jochen, where does NVIDIA fit in? How do you work with banks? What kind of conversations are you having? And yeah, tell us more about that.
Sure, yeah, so I'm part of the financial services team, which is a global one, and obviously I'm working in Europe with European banks, insurance companies, hedge funds, and so forth. And how does it fit? So we work with a lot of ISVs, software vendors that we sort of accelerate with our platform, and those are then used by banks, for example, in anti-money laundering applications. But we also have some direct relationships with lighthouses where we support them, like, for example, Deutsche Bank, and we work with GSI. So sometimes our founder and CEO keeps saying we are the only AI company working with all the other AI companies, and that's true. So we have a rich partner ecosystem that we collaborate with them.
Yeah. And how have things changed in the last couple of years in the kind of work that you're doing? And yeah, tell me more about how that's developed.
Yeah, it changed quite a bit. So when I joined about 3.5 years ago, NVIDIA market cap was number 19 or so. It took me like 2 hours to explain to customers what does it mean an accelerated computing platform, right? The hardware plus the software you need to combine. And my pitch obviously is now a little bit shorter, so it helps.
Yes, definitely. Okay, and Sartak, I think we've already heard a little bit earlier in the day about the different kind of possible use cases for AI in a bank, both internally in your kind of operations, but also in the kind of new products that might be developed for customers. It seems like there's so much going on at the moment. Can you tell me a bit more about how you work out what kind of projects to pursue? How do you narrow down into actual kind of achievable goals for your team?
So when we think about all the use cases, we break it down into three major categories. One is how can we be more for our clients? How can we run our company better? And how do we power our culture? And we start the use cases in a top-down and a bottoms-up approach. Bottoms-up because we think the actual use cases are with the actual operators who are facing problems day in and day out. And top-down because it has to align with the strategy. The prioritization, and we come up with around 700 ideas. And how do we prioritize that? It is a function of two things. One is about the ROI, the commercials, in terms of cost reduction or productivity or revenue generation or making our clients successful. And the second is feasibility. If I execute on this particular initiative, do I have the data, the technology, the talent, the SMEs available for me to execute on it? So these are the two driving forces.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I mean, out of a list of 700, I assume you wouldn't be able to do that kind of thorough assessment of all of them. Are you working on some kind of shortlist at the moment, and how have you narrowed it down?
It's a great question. So what we have done is we have taken all of these 700 odd use cases and broken down into 6 domains related to whether it's for our operations, for our engineering staff to improve ourselves, for our clients, for our risk and so forth. So these are 6 domains. But more importantly, we have also linked each use case in another dimension, which are the capabilities, whether it is prediction, classification, content generation, semantic reasoning, and so forth. So when we have that, it's an ability for us to take like the use cases will be more driven in terms of the domains, but the implementation will be more based on capabilities and you can reuse.
Yeah, yeah. And Kristen, how does that accord with how you've done things? Have you had a similar kind of process of narrowing down, or?
Yeah, it's similar but a little different. So I guess our approach is really focused on colleague augmentation in the first case. And what we did is we looked at all the types of work we do across the enterprise, and then married that with kind of our risk appetite, but also where we saw we could harness the most value. So similar to yourself, we have operations, we have frontline, we have client relationship management. So it's very similar. I think what's a little bit different about it is we have set up a champions network across the group. So every business and every function has someone who's accountable to bring those ideas bottom up into the center of excellence. And we use that as a lens for prioritization as well.
Yeah, yeah. And how do you make sure, I mean, you sort of mentioned this with making sure ideas are coming from the bottom up, but how do you ensure that there's room for that kind of feedback wherein if you're developing tools or projects from on high, that people who are actually having to use them are able to say what works and what doesn't? What kind of mechanisms have you developed?
Yeah, we have a couple of different approaches that we use, which I think really helps to build an innovative culture. So with different executive teams, we run hands-on immersion sessions to let that actually inform ideas and creativity and innovation. We recently, actually just last week, we ran our first global hackathon for generative AI with over, I think we had 1,200 colleagues in 9 global locations, which was a feat in itself. So that was great to get teams, multidisciplinary teams, actually working and building the use cases. And then in every single thing that we do, every initiative, whether it's an idea, a proof of concept, a pilot, or scaling, just like any innovation deployment, you're constantly iterating and testing and learning and getting that feedback. Because I think if it's not adding value to the end user, then yeah, it's probably not a priority for us.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Chris, how does this accord with the way you've been doing things? Could you just walk me through your structure for how you start to narrow down ideas and deploy them across the organization?
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very, very similar, I would say. I mean, definitely bottoms up, asking everyone what their ideas are, what art of the possible. definitely categorizing. I think we've probably got 4 or so categories of ideas that most things fall into. But critically, maybe most importantly, is actually top-down, right from the very top of the house, dictating that this is important, this is a strategy for the firm, and making it very clear to divisional presidents that they have to deliver on this, right? And so they are actually enthused, is maybe the right word, enthused to make sure this happens, right? Because unless the businesses themselves are actually wanting to change, they won't change.
Yeah.
Right? So they have to want to do it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess the needs of different parts of a bank are so different. They're such huge, sprawling organizations. Is it a given that centralizing everything in this way is the right way to go? Is it even possible for you to develop tools that will be useful across a whole bank like that? Or does there need to be some level of sort of spread?
I describe what we do as a little bit like the Sherpas on Everest. So most people can do most of this themselves within the various divisions, but there are gaps, there are crevices, you need to put a ladder across them, you need a rope here, there's bits missing. And actually, I think one of the most powerful things you can do is actually understand where those gaps are, because if you don't put the ladder across, people are going to fall into them and they're going to spend a lot of time getting out. So I think that's one of the, certainly what our team has found is actually identifying common themes from all the different places about what's going to stop them being able to deliver and actually fixing that. And then, yeah, you have data platforms and all that kind of things as well. But really understanding what's going to get in the way of execution, I think, is quite important.
Yeah, yeah. And how much of your time is spent on that? I mean, what's the balance between you guys kind of coming up with ideas and being able to impose what I guess you would see as positive things on the company as a whole versus to what extent are you managing the kind of problems that are arising from people starting to do their own experimentation?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, we're desperately trying not to tell people what to do.
Okay.
I mean, ultimately, the value in everyone is people ask you, like, where's the value, where's the return, what are the best use cases? That's going to come from the businesses. They're the ones that are going to have the ideas. They're the ones that are going to see how they can transform themselves with the new technology we have. And it's really about getting to them, surfacing their use cases, matching that with what's actually possible today. And probably tomorrow will be different, right? There'll be a different set of things you can do. But ultimately, really understanding what they can do and then matching that to the return. Being really clear about how this is going to transform and how it's going to improve revenues or how it's going to reduce costs.
Yeah, yeah. What about you, Sartak? How are you finding the balance between setting the agenda yourself from the centralized team versus kind of seeing what comes up?
Sure. So our goal at the central group is to empower and accelerate the speed of innovation. And from our perspective, we have 3 models. One is there are some, apart from building the core platform and the talent and the risk guardrails, as well as the operating model, the 3 approaches. One is certain things we'll build centrally, like big problems. As an example, modernization of our legacy platforms, or reconciliation, or so forth. We build it centrally. Too difficult, we'll do it one. The second approach is flow to work, where you have pods in each line of businesses. Some of them are just technical challenges, and how do we augment them in their pods, a couple of data scientists, flow to work. So if somebody is building some things around liquidity, how can we have a couple of data scientists there? That's flow to work. And third is flow to advice, where it's very light touch. And on the perimeters, on the spokes, people are executing, and we just give them the right advice in terms of what model, what risk guardrails, what should be the evaluation framework, and so forth.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Now, Jochen, from your perspective, I guess you've seen different banks doing things differently, different sort of setups around having a centralized team versus having these different groups feeding in. Could you just kind of sketch out the sort of different ways you've seen it done and what you see as the most kind of productive setup or what you think banks should be doing?
Well, I've seen a lot of variations here. So it's a very heterogeneous landscape, also in terms of maturity, obviously. So there are banks that are really cloud first, and we work with them quite easily because our platform in terms of hardware, software is available in all the major clouds like AWS, Azure, Google, and so forth. But we also see banks that leverage our AI operating systems, like a software that you can run across different clouds. So we see some attempts to have a multi-cloud strategy to reduce logins and everything. But sometimes also we have banks that are interested in building on-prem factories, really, leveraging compute and software and bring this basically to their data, which is not supposed to go to the cloud, also for cost reasons. But this can also be somehow connected in terms of using a similar control plane or platform with the hybrid, with the hyperscaler cloud strategy. So in the end, it's a hybrid multi-cloud approach, which gives you the most flexibility in the end, right? Of course, this is not like limitless or endless because the data gravity is existing, right? So, but it gives them a lot of intellectual freedom and to choose between the different clouds running on our software. And I think BNY has really shown how this could work, building such an AI factory using the hardware and the software hybrid approach.
So do you expect to see more of that at more banks going forward?
Yeah, I would expect to see more of this, yeah.
Okay, interesting. Okay, I think actually this is probably a good moment to pause. Unless, did you have something you wanted to add on that? Okay, no worries. I won't put you on the spot. Maybe this is a good moment to pause and see if we have any questions from the audience already. Yes, there's a few. I think there are roving mics coming your way. And if you could just introduce yourself before you speak.
Hi, my name is Mac. I run an outcome-based agency called Formula 2 GX Digital. I come from the consulting world, Accenture, Deloitte, and so on. I heard you all speak, and earlier also the panels that we're sharing. There's a lot of knowledge on how you are channeling all the ideas that are coming from different streams into creating the segments. One thing I have noticed, though, is to prioritizing those ideas into business case and also handling the internal silos. How do you handle that? There may be someone with more power versus the actual business case. How are you handling that? Will be good to know. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm not sure I caught all of that, but the question is about how you handle actually turning your products into a use case and making sure that the different silos within a bank don't get in the way of that. Is that right? Okay, who wants to handle that?
I can take the silo part of the question. Sure. And I think that's actually the benefit of, as Jochen said, there's different models, but I think one of the benefits of having a central model or a center of excellence is that you can almost play a very active role in breaking down those silos because you have complete visibility of all of the use cases, all of the function, everything you're trying to enable. And sometimes you actually play almost like a matchmaker. You might have a frontline challenge or use case in this business, and then you might have the same thing in a different business. And actually, it sounds really simple, but there's huge benefit in reuse by bringing those together. And by the act of bringing those together, you start to break down those silos. At least that's what we've been doing at Barclays. So it sounds really commonsensical and simple, but it doesn't always happen naturally in a large organization.
Yeah, and just to add to Kristen's point, the power of a centralized platform. So if you think about it, we think in terms of 3 levels of reusability, right? I run a meeting every week where I go through all of the peer CIOs of the bank and about their ideas. And it's a little bit of show and tell of what the hub does and what the spokes do. But the 3 levels, one is at a core infrastructure as well as model level sharing of ideas so that people do not go on and build things at different levels of clarity. And that was one of the questions in the previous sessions we talked about. How do we learn from each other? Every week, your biggest time you can get off is a week. Second is at a component level. So things like client in the news. You build that solution once, and that can be used for wealth management, that can be used for credit, that can be used for line 2, that can be used in various other ways. And the third is things at solution level. Things like request for proposal, as an example. You build it for one line of business, then you use it for second and third line of business, and all of you are trying to build a community to improve the solution.
Chris, was there something you wanted to add on that as well?
Yeah, I'm just sitting here with a little bit of imposter syndrome because I'm thinking our platform is not all that central. But I think actually, you can define platform in a lot of ways, right? And I think actually the one thing we are doing quite well, I think, is thinking of, we had governance just earlier, right? So actually thinking about how you govern how AI is used and actually how you can control that centrally, then that does lead to the use cases because obviously you have to know what's going on. That leads to inventories, so you can explain to your regulators what's going on. And eventually, yeah, you can absolutely build a central platform that's probably the nicest platform in the world and a lovely place to go. But in the end, banks do have silos. They love their silos. And ultimately, those silos often want to be in a silo. Perhaps technologically they've just got a different set of tech. So I think you have to support definitely a central platform, but also it is quite important to be able to support people where they want to be supported, and not be afraid of that as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Johan, what about you? Do you have any thoughts on this kind of question, navigating all the different silos within a bank?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned before, this hybrid multi-cloud approach, which is unified by a software platform, is very useful because you have a platform standard that even the silos could use, the innovative people in the edge, but as well as those that are working in the center. And such a platform also enables sort of the champions in the bank that are front-running, that are leading. It also, by the way, attracts them, keeping talent, attracting talent. But also such unified platforms, they enable also people that are not so used to AI, so they have an easy access to this. We also need to think about those people, right? So it's a unified software platform gives you sort of a good connection to all these different stakeholders and different levels of maturity using AI.
Yeah. Okay, I think we will come back to the audience for more questions in a moment, but I noticed so far we've been speaking in very positive terms about all the things that can be enabled and the way we can connect across all these different areas of bank and all the different products and tools that will be wonderful when they work. Let's maybe be a little bit more negative and think about what are the challenges or barriers that you guys face as well. I'm sure it can't all be too easy. Chris, maybe let's start with you. What's the main kind of barrier you found to actually...
The exact same things we were just talking about in some respects, right?
Okay,
so actually building that network and that cohesive approach and focus, I think is a natural challenge in any large organization. Mm-hmm. I think the topic of generative AI has probably dominated the news for the past year plus. So there is definitely a challenge around how you harness all the enthusiasm and the passion and the excitement, and I won't use the word hype, but that and channel that into value. I think doing that at a large scale across the organization has definite challenges.
Yeah, and I mean, I can use the word hype. How can you turn that into something positive in practice? As you say, there is all this excitement, but when that turns into hype, it can act as a barrier to progress. So how actually in practice do you harness that energy?
You have to kind of focus on business. It's some of the things we mentioned earlier. So you're focusing on business value, you're enabling your champion network, you're being really ruthless around prioritization, you're standardizing the technology and the tools and being very specific about what is available for people to consume. So there's all these kind of checks and balances you need to put in place, as well as governance and guardrails.
Yeah, that makes sense. Chris, what about in your organization? What have you found the biggest barrier to scale?
Well, I mean, look, it's obviously an important question. I mean, I was at a Sheryl Crow concert last night, and she did her new song, and it's all about AI, and it wasn't a positive song. I can promise you.
You want to give us a rendition?
No, that won't be happening. But I think maybe the people side as well.
Okay.
So this is going to change how people work, and so it's super important to actually think very carefully about how you bring your employees on that journey with you. I think having the understanding that roles are going to change, they are going to change, and actually putting in place training systems so that people can reskill, frankly, and can kind of get themselves up to speed on all the latest stuff. So certainly we have a large data science program now. Anyone in the firm can sign up to that, and you can at your own pace reskill yourself. So I think that is and it is, if you're going to use these tools right, you have to understand a little bit about how they work. And so it's very clear that this is going to become pretty important for most of the employees, I would say, in the future, that they know how to do this.
And Sartak, what about you? How do you manage those challenges, even particularly the ones Chris mentioned about at the employee side of it, how their careers are going to change?
I mean, I think to your point, to Chris's point also, I think the main challenge we see would be adoption and scaling. So it's easy to get to 80% right. Then the last mile, or even get to 90-95% right, that last mile is going to be very expensive. And that's because Wall Street typically has been a set of very deterministic systems. We have gotten used to, if I get X, I will do Y, right? The Swift standards and so forth. And here there is a lot of stochastic nature of things. And how do we get people balanced between the scale of solutions versus accuracy? How do we provide a little bit of transparency in how those decision makes? Because neural nets are perhaps not the best in terms of transparency. So how do we provide that? And finally, to Chris's point, the change management of people. How do we get them comfortable around this? How do we train them? How do we make them not just consumers, but builders in our platforms?
Yeah, yeah. And do you think there's any precedent in terms of the amount of technological change now employees are facing? I mean, where would you put this this most recent kind of explosion of AI relative to the other kind of tech changes an employee might have had to come to terms with?
No, I think it's interesting because most of our people are using this in their retail lives, right? When they walk out, ChatGPT, I mean, has really created that vibe around access to technology, and they understand it. But still, there is a little bit of scariness around, hey, this is neural nets, technology, and sometimes, as you would expect for any emerging in the initial phases. But I think it's our responsibility to take them through the journey of how the risks of technology versus the productivity gains that we have to do.
For sure. Was there something you wanted to add on that? Oh, good. Okay. It's because you're sitting near me. I keep
I know.
you. Anyone else from the audience have any questions? Yeah, we'll go for this one here. Yeah.
Peter Barrett from Avanade. I just wondered where your greatest challenges lay in terms of the innovation pathway. So is it getting use cases into production? Is it getting production live into the market? Or is it scaling it once it's in the market?
Who wants to go for that? Yeah, Chris?
So I have quite a firm view here, and I think it's about process re-engineering. So it's not actually about the AI models themselves, because we know what roughly they can do. I mean, what does an LLM do? It reads and it writes effectively, right? And it does that really well. And if you think about what every single employee does, generally they're in their Outlook, or maybe they're in their Excel, right? That's kind of often their daily life. So what you have now is a situation where you can actually replace those steps that people today are doing usually by sending an email, with an LLM, right? But then you actually want to re-engineer that whole thing front to back to get it super fast and super scalable. And so I would question whether all the firms that are trying to do this actually have that re-engineering talent, or the process re-engineering talent within them to actually be able to do everything they need to do at the scale they need to do it. So I think that, honestly, that's, I think, what will be one of the biggest challenges.
Okay. So in terms of the where exactly in the process that challenge lies, I mean, is that more towards the start when you're coming up with the idea and how you're going to deploy a solution, or do you find it to be, is it more towards the end when it's actually a case of
getting... Well, if you take something like onboarding a client, right? So typically that starts maybe with an email with a client, and it ends with them having an account open. And I think I'm correct in saying there's maybe like 27 different teams at our firm that are involved in actually making that happen. Generally, they communicate via sending each other emails. Generally, they're racing each other to do various pieces of that, and then they can't start until that person's done that, and so on and so forth, right? And anywhere that's been running for a decent period of time will have a whole bunch of legacy ways of doing this. And so that's exactly the sort of situation where this technology can help. But again, you've got to untangle what I would almost describe as a mess, right? You've got this 27 teams, they're all interacting in a somewhat chaotic way, but it works. And you have to try and untangle that and actually make that go really, really fast. And yes, LLMs are the key. They are the key to doing that, but you still have to do the untangling.
Yeah, yeah. Let's maybe work with that example a bit more. Kristen, if you're in a situation where you're trying to deploy AI to speed up the onboarding process, I think we can all kind of have a vague sense of how that might work. To the question, where do you find the biggest barrier in that process to be? What's the kind of part of that process that runs quickly, and what's the bit that then gets more stuck?
Yeah, and I guess one thing that we did when we set up the Center of Excellence is we have a process automation and re-engineering team, and we have a distinguished engineer who manages that for Barclays, and he is central to the Center of Excellence because they're so closely aligned. So we see a lot of opportunity there. I think for us, if I was to share some thoughts, I think the governance is always interesting and a challenge because there are so many different people and SMEs involved that you need to take through that journey, whether it's an initial idea through to scale. And then I would say actually the tech change and the change management of scaling something to, thousands of people can be challenging.
Yeah, for sure. And Sartak, what about you?
So in the bank, in BNY, we have been going into a platforms operating model where we have clear ownership of platforms. So onboarding being one of the most important platforms, and one of the platforms has gone live. And so as we build capabilities, it's a big part of it is simplification. And clearly AI is able to accelerate that simplification, because what are the challenges about onboarding? To Chris's point, a lot of manual handoffs, a lot of applications, all the way from prospecting to contract creation to billing to account activation and so forth. And a lot of applications that naturally do not talk to each other. And the natural connectivity was an email. And the opportunity set is, since a lot of this is unstructured data, sometimes asking the same questions multiple times to our clients and giving a pretty poor client experience, how can AI, specifically Gen AI for this unstructured data, connect that information to some of the structured data sets that you have and get it at scale?
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I mean, it sounds to me a bit like the main use cases where AI has room to really help a bank is when there are all these different parts of processes that don't talk to each other. However, that's also what's coming up as one of the main challenges to deploying it at scale, is the fact that there are all these different teams who don't talk to each other. Jochen, how do you think about that? Are we overestimating what AI can actually achieve here in terms of connecting different parts of organizations? How are you thinking about this kind of question of silos?
No, I think we underestimate here a little bit. So I think in the end we will have an orchestration of so many different models working internally, externally. So this scaling is really an important factor. And scaling, we see now a lot of customers want to optimize things. So really thinking about AI in terms of a factory. A factory has assembly lines, it has very efficient processes, it has a very complex orchestration of different business lines maybe. It also has an R&D department that needs to come up with new material, new products, whatever. And they are all running on the same platform, looking for the cheapest way to produce, the fastest way, and also embracing or reusing components like community-based models like Llama, and we see a strong trend here because those models are naturally smaller and better to operate. You can customize them, you can connect to your data sets. So internally, for example, a lot of internal applications where you connect using RAGs or something. So you vectorize your data, you connect it to a Llama model, you fine-tune these models, and you guardrail them all on the same platform and all at scale. Mm-hmm. So looking for the cheapest way to do this in terms of right scaling, right? That means having the right infrastructure for the job, for training, for inferencing. You don't need the super big infrastructure for inferencing. Maybe a smaller one is sufficient for a smaller model, right? Mm-hmm. So right-sizing the models and the infrastructure to really drive down the cost, the production cost, and also to gain more control over your models and data. IP stays with you, right? This is important. And so we see orchestration of these different models, combined different tasks. So it's really going to be an ensemble in the end that you need to manage.
Yeah, so there's no kind of one-size-fits-all approach. It's about having the right team for the right specific part of the task. Okay.
Yeah. Because it's been easy in the beginning with API-based models, so convenient to start with. But now you need to think about how to scale, how to make this cheaper, faster. For example, our inferencing microservice generates 3 times more tokens out of Llama, the same Llama model. So this is interesting now, putting everything on microservices and combining these models. Looking also for the lowest energy consumption when you do these things. It's very important, I guess. So AI Factory talks about optimization, finding the most efficient way into production. This is the new, let's say, focus now after 2023, where everybody was experimenting with API-based models.
Yeah.
I think actually Jochen raises a good point about the cost of this. That's another good reason to have some kind of central capability, because anyone that's been on a cloud journey has discovered, like, if you make stuff really, really easy to do, people will do it, and it gets really expensive really fast.
Right.
It's exactly what's going to happen here. As we make this easier and easier and easier to access, it's going to start costing money. So you have to be able to think quite carefully about who's paying for what. Have they got the budget to pay for that? And obviously the cost of production as well, it becomes very, very important too. So again, that's definitely easier to handle centrally.
Yeah. Okay. So
I would agree.
yeah.
Definitely.
Okay.
So that's something that's really important for us, especially around your whole control framework. In terms of part of your responsible AI policy, who has access to what, at what cost, when. So that's definitely part of our approach as well.
Yeah. So the kind of the centralized platform is actually really important just for keeping track of costs, which can become a real problem. I think there's another question from this sort of area, right? Well, yeah, let's go here, and then we'll come to you next.
Mani Janakiraman, product manager within London Stock Exchange Group. Question is slightly counterintuitive to the whole discussions that we are having. Do you think about what kind of effect it would have on human intelligence and intellect by relying too much on AI related? I ask this from your employee perspective. Of course, you can comment upon on a personal level as well. Are we really thinking about relying too much of this artificial intelligence capabilities are actually having an effect on, hopefully, it will enable some extra capabilities. But are we also thinking about taking a step back and thinking about what kind of effect it has on human intelligence and intellect, especially from a company perspective? Or have you taken a step back and thought about all of that? And also on a personal level, right? We are depending a lot on technologies now, and in fact, people have started doing research as to what kind of effect it has had on our personal intelligence levels. Are we using enough of our brains, as we have done some 20 years ago, reading the maps with a big book, especially traversing British roads, so on. So now we are just a piece of technology. Everything, it guides us and pretty much makes us dumb.
So yeah, really interesting question. For anyone who didn't catch it, essentially, how worried are you guys about the impact of using more AI tools on the intellect and brain power of your workforces? Is that something that you spend much time thinking about? Who wants to take that one?
I'll start if you like. Yeah, I mean, I think I heard a good analogy yesterday when maybe you think about where employees will go. And it was this image of a chess grandmaster walking around the tables, playing 40 different games at exactly the same time and winning all 40 of them. And I think you could imagine that's probably how AI will end up being used. I mean, we definitely like to have human in the loop. I think it would be, obviously there are cases where you remove the human, but I think we really like having human in the loop. So what you're going to end up with actually is you're going to get even better employees, the best engineers, the most distinguished engineers, right? And they will be the ones controlling, for want of a better word, a sort of army of AI bots that are doing stuff for them. But in the end, it's their intellect that's actually running this, and they're watching over it, and they're making sure that actually the right things are happening. But these things are actually doing things, and they're actually you can see how that would massively enhance their productivity. So I think that kind of sense. So if anything, it doesn't dumb things down. Actually, employees get smarter and smarter and smarter and have to become smarter, I think, as a result.
Yeah. Does anyone else want to speak to that? Kristen, any thoughts?
Oh, I guess my thoughts are I think we're some way off from emulating the human brain, if you like. But it's a really good question. I think we would be the same as yourself, Chris, in terms of everything we're doing has a human in the loop. And that's a kind of part of our responsible approach, but actually also part of our thinking. A lot of the feedback we've had from the things that we've been trialing and building and scaling have been positive in terms of improving the kind of colleague experience, helping bring efficiency, productivity, creativity. Once you understand how to interact with the technology, we're seeing a lot of creativity coming through, which I think is really quite interesting space to watch and really encouraging, particularly in our industry. So I think it will lead to more diversity of thought. At least that's what I'm seeing right now, but don't know.
Yeah. Sartek, maybe let's flip the question slightly around then to avoid just everyone agreeing that we're sure our intellects are fine. I suppose there's always going to be a variation among employees between those who are quite happy to embrace the new tools and those who have more concerns. I know I personally would be slightly terrified to be running an army of AI bots, much less being responsible for them. So how do you make sure there's not a kind of bias wherein the feedback that you're hearing is from those who see themselves as more keen, who want to maybe volunteer to be some kind of champion or join a call? How do you make sure you're hearing kind of from all perspectives?
Sure. I mean, a big part of the platform, and Raquel talked in our previous session, is our risk framework. And a big part of the risk framework is change management of our people. The change management is definitely about giving them the tools to learn. Another aspect we are doing is, because we have a platform, we have allowed people to create agents on our platform with clicks. So you can create agents on unstructured documents or structured documents. So get used to it. And a lot of sessions around, whether it's hackathons, as Kristen mentioned, as well as promptathons, which was mentioned before, because the barriers of using this has gone down. So when we get people participative in all of this, I think that simplifies it. On top of that, from a platform perspective, we look at risks at 3 levels. The core infrastructure risk, whether it's data loss prevention, PII, cyber, all of that is there. But at a model level, it's about fairness, ethical usage, accountability, transparency, privacy, and security are super important. And all of these is a cultural change. All of us have to embrace the usage with this technology and investing in that.
Yeah. And Jochen, I'm just interested if this is a question that's come up for you before. Is this something that ever arises when you're talking to banks? Has there been much concern about the impact on the workforce and their brains?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, here it's important to invite everyone to participate and bring the ideas, right? And what we have done at NVIDIA, I think, is really bringing down this compute cost and democratizing access. Right. So as you might know, we work a lot with these open source frameworks like even Spark, Pandas, right, which is data processing. A lot of people don't know that you can massively accelerate this with GPUs. So it has become very easy for people to, test their use cases, to get some experience, to quickly come to a conclusion if this POC makes sense or not, or if we need to adjust it, and then how to scale that, right? So embracing all these open source and community tools and models, making it very easy for the data science community because they already know these tools, but now they are accelerated. That means they can execute their experiments much faster. And also on our new website, AI-NVIDIA.com, you have all these models like Llama and these community models, and you can just use them and test them. There's an API access. So theoretically, everybody can just go there and test a little bit. And once they are happy, they just take the model and put it into a container, which contains this model. And then you have a model to go, which you can run in every cloud. You can run it even on-prem, right? So that makes this experimentation much easier. So this fail fast, fail forward mentality, right? Because you just can test it and learn about it also. So also for people to get more experience, how to also this educates them to a certain extent because they make some tests with a model and they see this doesn't work here, it's not so smart. Maybe then can I change the model to another community model? I switch from Mixtral to Llama or, right? So our NIM microservice supports that. You can just deploy a Llama in like 5 minutes. And next time you use another community model, you can also test these models against what is more credible, which has the better trust in some, how can you reduce the hallucinations, right? All these things, just build it. So we need to be able to be very creative with these things. So we democratize the access to this.
Yeah. I mean, certainly the idea of letting people use their creativity as they experiment around seems pretty crucial. I think we have time for just one more question, maybe. Let's go to you here.
Hello, Sean Kilgar from Finster AI. We've heard a lot today around kind of partnerships at the infrastructure level and at the kind of model provider level. I'm curious how you think about build versus buy strategy at the use case level. Yeah,
so build versus buy. Who wants to speak to that? Chris,
I can have a go. I mean, look, I think it's a difficult topic because the state of the art is moving so fast and increasing so fast that anything someone is trying to sell you today, probably within a year you can build yourself, right, using the tools that are available. And that, I think that makes it really, really difficult. So in terms of, assuming we're not talking about, AI hardware and stuff, but if it's about AI services that you are looking at buying in, I think it's just really difficult. Because as I say, the speed with which stuff is arriving is so impressive that, anything you can think of today, you'll be able to do that yourself tomorrow.
Yeah. Any thoughts?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I could. So we try to look into what are in a value stream, what are our strategic advantages, right? What is our competitive advantage? And a big part for BNY is the largest custodian, the largest collateral manager, the largest securities lending agent, and its data. And how can we help our clients be successful? So how do we set up that data internally for it to be used by tools and technology and hardware and software that will come in? That is something that we'll build the common control framework so that we are regulatory compliant in every jurisdiction we work with. But the technologies we'll leverage with the hyperscalers, because that's not something we will build.
Yeah. I would say, because it's always good to have a mixed portfolio of bets. So I think at Barclays, we are investing a lot in partnerships in this space, both with the large enterprise partners that we've worked with well for years, but also really keeping an eye and being very vigilant in what's happening in the startup community as well, because there's a huge amount of innovation happening outside the usual suspects too.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're basically out of time here, but I want to just end with a very quick, basically one or two word answer from each of you. The title of this panel had pretty much a yes/no question of can centralized platforms help banks deploy AI at scale? What would be your response to that question?
I think clearly yes. I think we've heard why.
Yes, absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, pretty clear answer from everyone there. Thank you so much for participating, and thanks everyone for your questions.